Welcome to RESGEN's Giving Life podcast. Stories and conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and exploring ways that we as men can give life to others. My name is Tom Henderson, founder of RESGEN, and I am pumped you are tuning in to this episode of the podcast. Before we get rolling, I want to real quick thank those of you that have already subscribed, shared, and or rated the podcast. Our audience and impact continues to grow, and I can't thank you enough for being a part of helping that growth occur. Now, if you haven't done that yet, today would be a good day to do so, because my guest on this episode has been a friend, mentor, and father figure of mine for over 30 years. I first met DeVries back when I was in the 7th grade when I was only 13 years old, and he's been a part of my life ever since. Reed's a husband, a father, a grandfather, a pastor, and a business leader whose influence has impacted thousands around the world. On today's podcast, Reed and I visit about what keeps him so energized and motivated after 40 plus years in the ministry and business world, how we as dads can successfully navigate different stages of our kids' lives, and we also talk about how powerful our words truly are, not just in others' lives, but in our own as well. I have no doubt that you're going to enjoy and be encouraged by my conversation today with Reed DeVries. Reed DeVries, we did it. You're on the Giving Life podcast.
Man, it's my list of 100 goals and dreams. I'm checking it off tonight when I get home. Bam.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is on the original 100. It might have been like 101 that you added, but
when I put my original 100, I didn't know this podcast was even in existence, or it would have been.
Right. This was kind of an outcome of COVID, and so that gave us time to finally put this together. But well, seriously, it is so fun to have you here today. And as I shared in my intro, I said that you first really came into my life back when I was 13 years old. A ripe 13-year-old, and anybody that knows middle school, it is a ripe 13 because middle schoolers were not real fond of bathing at times. But you came into my life 7th grade, age 13, and then you've been a part of my life ever since in so many different roles: youth pastor, father figure, and then you were really the catalyst to bring me back to Sioux Falls after I was 6 years in Portland, Oregon, of ministry out there, and bringing me back to Sioux Falls. And then we ministered together here, and then you were on the RESGEN ministry board for 10 years. So, it just makes sense that we're doing this together now because you've been a part of so many other parts of my life.
Well, and the key way that you know that I love you is when we helped you move from in a minus 30 degree below zero weather into your house.
That is no lie. When we moved me into, it was like January 12th, and it was January 12th that I moved back to Sioux Falls, a place that I said I'd never move back to. But you were so persuasive in getting me back here and the whole call of God thing. But we unloaded the truck, and it was like 14 below zero regular temperature.
Without wind chill.
Without wind chill.
It was brutal.
I remember a friend of mine helped us move to Sioux Falls. He made the long trek across I-90 to help move us in. And I'll never forget, he'd never been around this kind of cold before. And he said, literally, my nose hairs are frozen. I didn't know that was possible. And so I felt like we gave him a great experience as well. So it was a great way to baptize me back into Sioux Falls life.
It was. And I'll just say this. You already know this, but I'll just tell everybody else. I love you with all my heart. And I'm just so proud of you. The work that God has done in you, through you, and your ability to be transparent, your ability to be human, and yet let Christ walk through that is a marvelous thing. So I'm super grateful for how God's using you and you allowing him to do that.
Well, you're very kind. And it's because God's been very gracious to me in continually having people in my life like you that saw potential in a skinny 14-year-old kid. That lacked confidence, that had a mask of confidence. And I know
we've all had that.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some masks that we sometimes can wear as guys today, which is probably appropriate because we're still, of course, coming out of this whole COVID season. Yeah. I know there's a lot more hope, I think, that people are feeling just because of just it's been a crazy year in trying to navigate these seas. And I think that there's been a lot of difficult things that have happened with the whole COVID situation, obviously. But there's also been some, I think, good things. On a previous podcast I did with Senator Thune, he talked about how that allowing families to maybe interact or be around each other in ways they hadn't been before, that was important, and kind of reconnection of families. But Reed, let me just ask you, we're going to dive right in here. In this whole season of COVID, what are some of the things that God really taught you through this season, or maybe opened your eyes to, whether that be with yourself or that you've seen in just our culture?
Yeah. First of all, I think COVID, I think you'll understand why I said it's a gift. Everything's a gift if you look at it the right way. Cancer can be a gift. Okay. Financial loss can be a gift. Struggles of any form can be a gift if you look at it the right way. And so many times when people face opposition or face struggle or adversity, they take it as an enemy. Well, the reality, no, it can be a great friend if it makes you examine yourself. And so while I would say COVID, for many people, has been an enemy, I think COVID has also been a gift if we look at it that way, because it reveals things in ourselves. Our pastor at church always says this. He says that COVID, all it did was expose us, our hearts. Because, you read in the Old Testament, or obviously even the New Testament, but especially in the Old Testament, the nation of Israel, what got them in trouble all the time? They worshiped other idols all the time. Yeah. And yet God said up front, okay, here's one command. Here's the one God, that's it. And yet all these idols came into the nation of Israel. Are you kidding me? And yet that's us. So I think one of the things that COVID did for people who are willing to let it do that is expose, what are my idols really? Because if I'm really freaked out about something, it's probably because it's an idol. So if I'm freaked out about my finances, it could be it's an idol. If I'm freaked out about, you see what I'm saying? If I'm freaked out about different things, okay, why am I freaked out? Because the Bible says, fear nothing. Let's say freak out, fear nothing. So if I'm scared about something, freaked out, why? Why is it the case? Well, I might die. Whoa, okay, I go to heaven. What? That's a good day. That seems like it'd be a really good day. So what is it that I'm scared of? Is that because it's an idol to me? So for me personally, during this season, it's been a great one for God to say, okay, Reed, we're going to look at some things that could be idols for you to make sure there's only one. For a lot of people, their thought process is, okay, it's God 1. Okay, then it's my wife 2, then children 3, my job 4, and so forth, so forth.
Right.
The reality, it's God 1, God 2, God 3, God 4. There is no other. It's just God. So anything that is fighting for my heart, anything that is fighting for my mind, my spirit, I got to be aware of that, because that could be a God. So because of that, I say COVID can be a gift.
Sure. If
you look at it that way. So those are one of the things that personally for me has been a part of the journey over the last months.
Well, obviously that perspective, obviously with the book of James, consider it pure joy when you face trials and temptations of any kind. Well, there's no question this was a trial. And scripture says that we are supposed to consider it pure joy, which is like the exact opposite of human nature, right? Yeah. But it is that perspective. And that doesn't mean that there isn't difficulty that can be a part of that. And obviously there was a lot of challenges. There was some financial challenges. There was loss of life. There was a fear of health, and how do we navigate this? But even amongst that, we're told to consider it pure joy, which is of course impossible if we don't have our focus on Christ in that process.
Because one of the things that happens in all of us, or humans, is there's a fear of loss. What COVID did is put out this dynamic fear of loss. Well, you only fear of losing something if you think you own it. I'll be honest with you. I never fear someone stealing your car.
Okay, that's rude.
Yeah, but that thought has never gone through my mind.
Right.
Ever. Why? It's not my car. No, I'd sympathize with you and say, I'm praying for you, brother. You know, but I've never had the thought because it's not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I've never had a thought of losing, of my, in a certain stock, losing if I don't own it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So if I fear of losing something in my mind, I think I own it. And here's the reality. I own nothing here. It's all God's. One of the prayers over these last months has been every day I pray this prayer. I say, God, it's all yours. I own nothing. This car, it's yours. This house, it's yours. This body, it's yours. My wife is yours. My kids, my grandkids, they're yours. Anything that's in an account, it's yours. Everything is yours. Today, would you teach me how to steward what's yours? So if I lose something today, well, I never had it. I never owned it. I was just simply a steward of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the mentality that I think we're supposed to have, because this world is not mine.
Right.
My place is there in heaven. That's where he has a place for me. Nowhere in there it says, Reed, I'm preparing a place for you on earth. No, he didn't say that. He said, up there I have it.
Mm-hmm.
So there I have it. But here, I own nothing. So I have no fear of loss because it's not mine. Now, I want to take care of everything.
Right. I was just going to say, that doesn't mean we don't take care of it.
No.
But we take care of it,
Because
not because it's ours, but because it's God's.
And because I will respond and give an account to it for God as well. But it's his daughter, not my wife.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of attitude. So those are a couple of things that for me have been, I think, key mind shifts for me over this season.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to start. And so I want to continue down just on the, just because masking has been such a big part of our language, our apparel that we are wearing, we're our fashion, for lack of better words, over the last year. But of course, we know that it's very easy just to wear a mask just pre-COVID too. And
Absolutely.
When COVID is all said and done, or it's the conversation about it is different, and maybe masking isn't necessarily a part of our normal things that we need to wear. It's very simple. You mentioned the Israelites, and just that the consistency of just continually going back and having short memory, right? And God providing for them, and then them just going their own direction, and God providing for them, showing grace, mercy, all this. But okay, but I want to talk about this masking, because you and I have had conversations just about the masks that guys wear, that we're tempted to wear, the secrets we keep. So talk with me just a little bit about that, because I know that's just something that's been on your heart lately, and I think an important thing for us to talk about.
Well, I can even jump back a lot earlier in my life, because as you know, and I've been very open with, I had a 16-year addiction to pornography. My father introduced it to me when I was a teenager, and carried all the way through my college years into my first 9-10 years of marriage. And at that same time, I'm on staff at a church in youth ministry. So here I am, I'm leading worship. I'm leading people to Christ, because there was never a time I didn't love God. Never. I've always loved God with my heart, soul, and mind. But that addiction was so much, unfortunately, a part of my life but it was a secret. No one knew about it. And this is the days before the internet. Right. So you had to search for it, that kind of thing. And it was interesting because, I think as we talked about, we all wear masks to cover things that we think we're inadequate in. And an addiction is simply an attempt to fill something in my life that I feel is inadequate. It's not good enough. And so when we use the word addiction right away, we think of, the bad ones. Well, workaholic. Man of living, I was a workaholic. That was an addiction for me. Mm-hmm. And I got praised for it. People get trophies for it. They get bonuses for it.
Yeah.
For that addiction. I always say this, it's kind of like you and I could be in prison together, okay? In January, here in Sioux Falls, and we both escaped from prison. Okay. You go to Maui, Alaska. You go to Maui, Hawaii. I go to Barrow, Alaska. Okay. Yours was a good escape. Mine was a bad escape. Either way, it's an escape. And so a lot of people mask things to try to escape from it. Things that either from the past, failures that I still haven't ever gotten forgiven for or forgiven myself for, or bad choices or escapes, kind of variety of things. And so unfortunately, I think what happens for men is, hey, how you doing? Yeah, fine. How you doing? Fine, fine, fine. Well, fine is not the reality. Fractured, that's fine. F, okay. Inadequate, okay. A knucklehead, okay. Variety of things. And unfortunately, in our society, we are okay with that. But when we can get to this, where men are being honest about what's really on the inside, really, what's behind the mask, really. I mean, what's going on down in your heart, really, man, then there's great freedom. So I think the whole COVID situation has just been an hour display of, to be honest, things that are going inwardly all the time, even before the virus came.
So since you mentioned, I was planning on us visiting about this at some point today. However, the Lord guided our conversation. So you mentioned the 16-year addiction that you had to that. So what was kind of the tipping point to where you said, man, I can't allow this to be a part of my life, to be a controlling issue in my life? Because a lot of times with sin, and we think we can just manage the sin, we think we can just control the sin, right? But what it really is that's controlling us. And we can build up this lie in our head that no, I'm in control. I can stop whenever I want. I can just try harder, whatever. But what was it that you're like, man, I can't do it anymore?
I think it's a couple things that, for me, it's just only my story, might not relate to others. I saw that it was killing my marriage. Cindy didn't know I had the addiction, but she knew something was going on because, especially pornography, it kills your soul. I mean, it does. It says sexual sin, every other sin's outside, but this one's on the inside. It does. It just kills your soul. So your ability to love unconditionally, your ability to love with no boundaries, that's not there, because pornography is such a take addiction. And so I saw it, that it was destroying my marriage. It was just eating at it. And I knew where that road led. I also knew that from scripture that the sins of the fathers, okay, go to the next generation. And I painted a very clear picture in my mind of my kids finding out, because everything will be found out. Everything will be found out. I'm sure you've been in a situation, I've been in a situation where someone passed away and then the family found out. It could be stuff that was hid in the house. It was stuff that was hid somewhere. It never goes unhidden, ever. The Bible says that.
Yeah.
And I just put a picture in mind of my kids finding out, and the pain on their heart, but then also the realization that they were going to have to pay for it. I always tell guys that, listen, or gals too, if you're going to marry somebody and you find out that just before you get married that they have $250,000 in debt, guess what you just got? $250,000 in debt. Because whatever you're married to, you got it. It's yours too. Well, in spiritual terms, I knew this, that whatever debt I had that I didn't take care of and I didn't get right, it would move on to the kids and even the grandkids. And the thought personally of my children or my grandchildren paying the price for my choice, I can't. And so what that did for me is that forced me to face the reality. And then I had to go to a counselor. So I went to a counselor for 3 years on a regular basis, because I knew it wasn't just stop. And it wasn't just guardrails. It wasn't just put good friends around me, which is all needed. I had to unwrap and figure out, what was I escaping from? What was this that I was escaping from? What was the emotional need or the emotional point that this was covering, masking? And to be honest, every person's story is a little different. But for me, after about 2.5, almost 3 years of counseling, It was one question that the counselor asked, and all of a sudden I went, that's it. That was for me. That is what I was covering up, and that was what was happening. And it had to do something with my dad leaving the family, because he had left our family when I was in 9th grade. And I went, that's it. And all of a sudden it dawned on me. Now, it didn't boom immediately, but once I understood it, then every time I had the emotion, the thought, the whatever, I went, no, I know what's happening. I know what's happening. I know where this road leads. Okay, nope, not going to do it. And then guardrails, others, and so forth were a part of that whole journey.
Yeah. So talk about some of the guardrails that you have just in place, that whether, and I know that it has changed. And so with the internet, and I mean, it's so readily accessible and prevalent, I mean, you don't got to search for it. It finds you, social media, all those kinds of things. So what are some of those boundaries, guardrails that you have in place, and or that you also, because I know that you do a lot of course, ministry with all different people, but men as well, that you encourage others to have.
Sure. First of all, I never trust myself ever. And I think that's a big mistake. I think a lot of men trust themselves.
Yeah.
I'm getting better now. No, I remind myself every day, I know what I'm capable of. I know what I can go back to on a moment. So I'm very aware of that. Obvious guardrails of, at home, okay, cable, but any channel there, I don't get HBO and no movie kind of thing.
Sure.
Well, Disney Plus. Okay, I got Disney Plus. Okay, and that was okay.
We're safe there for now.
Yeah, for now. But that was a guardrail. Everything on my phone, others have all eyes on my phone.
Yeah.
I think for a number of years, when smartphones came out, I kept the flip phone for that reason.
Yeah.
People used to give me a hard time on that. Say, you got it. What? Where's your smartphone? I said, no, this is a stupid phone, but it's smart for me. Because then it was no issue at all. I do have a smartphone now today just because of being able to access some things.
Yeah.
But there's people who oversee, I don't have apps. Okay. I only have a couple apps, like a bank app, a couple of those apps kind of thing. But they govern that. Anything I look at, they see it, covenant eyes. My wife has all the passwords at her house. And I said, never tell them to me. When you die, if she dies before me, I have to get all new computers. Okay. Because I don't know where any of the passwords are for anything. But I also then have people in my life that constantly ask me, so tell me something you don't want to tell me. That was something a number of years ago. One of my mentors statement. Asked me, I hated it.
Yeah.
but he'd always ask me, the last thing he said, so Reed, tell me something you don't want to tell me. And I think the other thing is I lived with secrets for so long. I was determined, I don't ever want to live with secrets again. I told our kids just a little bit ago, I said, listen, if mom and I pass away, there's nothing, you're not going to be shocked by anything in the house. Okay. Everything, if there's something that comes out on the internet about me, you already know it.
Yeah.
There's no secrets. I don't ever want to live with secrets again.
Yeah. That's good. Well, I appreciate you sharing that from, just your story, and because it's a story of healing and of restoration and all that. And I think that's the power, because it's a power of the gospel. It's God taking, whatever, and there's whatever sin it is, and a lot of times we look at it as, well, the big sins versus the small sins and whatever, but it's no matter how big or small we think it is, it creates that lack of freedom. It creates that living in secrecy. And you think about just in that, the desire to hide, I mean, that's the Genesis story, right? I mean, the immediate guilt and hiding, that it's very easy to hide. To live that way for so long, and you just decided, what, I can't do that, and I don't want to. What I love to read is that you said, I don't want to run the risk of this, continuing to be passed down from generation to generation, and for them feeling the pain of that, and the hurt from that. And so, really, what you've done is you've been, I mean, you kind of broke the cycle of destruction that could have been in place. So what encouragement would you give to guys that maybe their background has included some destruction? And now they're faced with, can I make better choices? Can I break the cycle? Like, but they lack confidence in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my favorite phrases is today is the first day of the rest of your life. And simply says this, it starts now. Everything starts now. Unfortunately, most people can never get to the next phase of their life because they're always dragging everything behind with them. Okay. And at some point, you've got to get forgiven and forgive, including yourself. I had to forgive myself and say, okay, I blew it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I am sorry. But then once I did, okay, God, let's go forward. And just an emotional, just a mental, I don't say this, I'll say it here, but I won't say it. But I try to live naked because in the garden, they were naked and not ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to be as naked as I can with, this is me, this is who I am,
Mm-hmm.
Kind of thing, the way God's wired me. I am no better than anybody else, but I'm no worse than anybody else. I'm one of God's great creations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to live naked with God and hopefully with you and with others in who I am. But let's move forward on that. And I think then you have to also rewire your brain. What I mean by that is you have to put time aside to train your mind. Like if you're out of shape physically, well, there's some things you have to do to now train your body physically, train your mind the same way. So I read a lot of books. I listen to a lot of audios.
Mm-hmm.
I put a lot of stuff into my mind intentionally. I watch very little television. Okay. Why? Because I'm going to be very intent about what I put into my mind. And so that'd be the other thing I say. You have to put time aside to read books, read God's word, spend time with other people, pouring things into your mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the good news is back in the day, you literally had to read books, and guys aren't known to be readers for the most part. A lot of guys don't like to read, but now because of technology, we can have books read to us, right? And and we have podcasts like this, we have sermons, and we have so much stuff that can be filling our minds with things that are positive, that can help shift our focus, that can help shift our trajectory of how we live even that specific day. And so I love that idea of training the mind, because at the end of the day, that's where sin starts.
Yeah.
The sin starts in the brain,
absolutely,
in our mind.
Yeah.
And then are we going to marinate in it? Or then we're going to create action out of it? And so it's the retraining of the mind. It says, whatever is right, whatever is true, whatever is noble, think about those things, Scripture says.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it's interesting. Most men would like to be thought of as the leader. Okay, I'm the leader of my home, or I'm the leader of my kids, or they want to be a leader kind of thing. One of my mentors a number of years ago did something to me that really shifted this whole thought process, because I had not been a major book reader at that point. I mean, I was starting to try to read more. And so he asked me, he said, Reed, he said, you're reading now? He said, how many books are you reading right now? He said, well, I said, I'm averaging about one book every 2 months. So this year will be about 6 books. And he goes, well, that's good, because the average person reads 1 a year. So you're reading 6. He says, that's great. I'm going, yeah, well, thank you. Yeah. And he said, how about your wife? Does she read? I said, oh, my wife reads a lot. She does. He said, how many books does she read? And I said, well, jeepers, she reads, probably at least 2 a month. He says, whoa, that's good. He said, so basically she reads 24 books a year. You read 6. And then he paused. He said, Reed, it's really going to be hard to lead your wife when she knows 4 times more than you do. I'll tell you, the sword went all the way through. And I got it. And I went, okay, you know what? I'm not dominant over my wife. Now, obviously, we are equals.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to lead the home spiritually, I've got to make a decision to be intent now about pouring into my mind and being a leader in how much I read and put into my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been married, how many years have you been married now?
Almost 43.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was over 40. And so just tell me some of the things that you're a very intentional person. I mean, you do such a good job of being intentional. And I remember in so many of our conversations, we could talk for days about all the things that we've talked about over the years, and just in our leadership conversations, in our need for mentoring conversations, all those kinds of things. But one of the things I've always loved is that you're very intentional in how you use your time, your ability to think in blocks, and just to do focus where focus needs to be at any given time. So tell me some things that you've done that have really helped you focus on your marriage, to where you could say, look, okay, for 43 years, here's some things that we have done to help us get to 43 years, and not just get there, but enjoy, the process.
Good question. Great question. I always tell people this. I love doing this, especially if people don't know me real well, kind of thing. I look at them and I say, my wife, Cindy, I never like to speak badly about somebody. I really don't. Okay. But I got to say this. Her first husband was a jerk. Her first husband was a moron. He was egotistical. He was a bully. He was domineering. I have to, that's the truth about him. And then I pause. I say, and I can say that because I'm her first husband.
Right.
Okay. So it's not like, oh my word, I got this. But I think one of the things that helped me is understanding. In fact, there's a book out recently that I read, I think it's a phenomenal book called Atomic Habits.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have read that. Obviously, it's nothing new, except it framed it in a great way. But where each of us are at in our lives, good or bad, is a result of habits. That's all it is. That's all it is. Not talent. It is not skill. It is not personality. It is not how we grew up kind of thing. It's our habits.
Mm-hmm.
We have to own that. Okay. So if I'm, in great shape physically, it's because of habits. If I'm in terrible shape physically, it's in habits. Marriage is the same way. So whenever I'm talking with a couple on their marriage, I say, okay, real simple. I'm going to give you 4 little thoughts, and then I'm going to ask you which of these 4 or all of them are you not doing? Okay. Because if they come to me and their marriage is not where they want it to be, or it's upside down, I know it's always because they're not doing one or a combination of these 4. It's very simple. Daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. That's it. Daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Daily is this. I pray with my wife every day, morning and night, and I tell her I love her. That's daily. Pray with, not just for, pray with, and tell them you love them verbally. Weekly, date night. Date night, every week. The 2 of you by yourself, somewhere. Doesn't have to be expensive, but somewhere by yourself. Monthly, walk through a marriage book together. Learn together. Walk through a marriage book together and study marriage. Yearly, get away together. Mm-hmm. So I say, which of the 4 are you not doing? And almost always, it's all 4. Almost always.
Yeah.
I say, okay, then I have a simple question. Do you really want the marriage to work? And if they say yes, okay, which of the habits are you going to start right now? Mm-hmm. Right now. Because what got you here is your habits. What can get you to a wonderful place is your habits. And that's all it is. It is not, well, if she would, or he would, or whatever the case may be. No, it is simple habits. So if your marriage isn't where you want it to be, it can be. Because I'll tell you, our marriage is phenomenal. For me, I mean, I think it's fabulous, and Cindy would say the same thing. And we're having more fun than we've ever had ever, kind of thing. But those 4 habits are in our calendars on every week. And if it can't be, boy, it's only because of an odd situation, and it'll be right back in the calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. And even just like I love that thought of the habits, really thinking about what are our habits? What habits have we fallen into? Because that could be a very telling question as well, as you think about your relationship, whether that be with your spouse, with your kids, even your habits at work. What habits have we gotten into?
Everything. In fact, one of the things, I'll just move real quick into something parenting. One of the things that I ask our kids, probably at least every 3 to 4 months, or maybe 4 to 6 months. But I often, multiple times during the year, I say, is there anything about me that you wish I would do more of, less of, stop doing, start doing? More of, less of, start doing, stop doing. Because I always said, I don't want to be the dad that, whatever years from now, my kids outside are going, oh my word, Dad. Oh, I know. There's nothing, we can't change him. That's just the way he is. It ain't gonna change. I don't want to be that dad. Yeah. Okay, I don't want to be that guy. So tell me now, what do you want me to do? More of, less of, stop doing, start doing. And especially if you do it with your kids, you'll be surprised at what they say. You'll be very surprised at what they'll say. It might not be a big thing to you, but it's a big thing to them. So,
well, and I remember you actually sharing those 4 questions with me, not asking me, hey, Tom, what do you want me to do less of?
But you're free on this to say it right now, Tom, if you want. I'm okay.
No, but I remember you sharing those questions with me in our conversations about parenting, and because I think that as dads, we all want to have great relationships with our kids at each stage. And as we look into the future, we said, boy, I want to have a great relationship with my adult children as well. Absolutely. And not just because I want them to bring the grandkids over, but because there's a point where we go from being, and this is going to sound, the word is going to sound negative, but I don't mean it to, like controlling, where we kind of determine like the trajectory of our kids' life. And, but then at different stages, we go from being a controller to more of a consultant with our kids, and a peer in friendship. And so that's one thing that you've done extremely well, Reed. And that doesn't mean that you didn't have struggles with your kids when they were teenagers, and you didn't have to have some difficult conversations with them when they were teenagers. But you really successfully navigated the difficult season of handing off that control, trusting. And so talk with me about that, because I know that's a big challenge and question for a lot of guys. And to be honest with you, like I'm in that world right now, where I've got a sophomore in high school and a freshman in college. And there's certain things, certain input that I would like to give, but it's not very positive if I do. You know what I mean?
Sure. No. It's interesting. Obviously, parenting never stops. It never stops at whatever age. If I'm 80 and my child is, 60, I'm still a parent, in that way. I think, in kind of the 30 years of youth ministry, I think one of the things I saw over and over, if there's a mistake parents made, is 2 mistakes. One is they parented in the moment. Okay. The child did this, whatever this was, and they parented for that moment. Okay, kind of thing. And what I mean by that is you never parent in the moment. You parent for the future. So for example, here's what I say. 2-year-olds, let's use an example. Okay. They call them the terrible 2s. You know what? I always called them the terrific 2s. Because I was never parenting a 2-year-old. I was parenting a future godly leader who happens to be 2. I was never parenting a 14-year-old. I was parenting a future godly leader who happens to be 14. I'm not parenting a 38-year-old. I'm parenting a future godly leader, current godly leader, but also more future godly leader who happens to be 38. Make sense? So the vision changes. I talked with somebody just recently, and their 14-year-old is, boy, there is havoc in the house. And they're trying to parent about the havoc. I said, no. I said, you don't do that. I said, first of all, you have to see, do you believe that with God leading them, they can be a future godly leader? Well,
I'm having trouble seeing that right now.
But that's where you trust God. Okay, great, because I don't own them. Okay, God owns them. They're not my. They're just steward. So I said, so based on that, let's parent now the 14-year-olds. So even the issue of what's going on right now in their 14-year-olds, say, you know what, son, in 3 years, you're going to be graduated. Isn't that crazy? In 3 years, you're going to be graduated, son. You know what? In 10 years, more than likely, you might be married. You're going to have a job. You might have a home. Now, I'm saying that because, number one, I want them to know they're not living here.
You're not living in my basement.
But I'm painting a picture of where they're at and say, you know, where you're going to be at there, we need to talk about some things that are happening here that are going to affect that if we don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always tying the present to their future, okay? John Rosemond, Rosemond.
Yeah.
Tremendous author about parenting. And I think he does a great job in that. So that's one of the things I see parents make a mistake. You always parent to the future godly leader. And then, okay, now how does that apply to this age? How I speak to them. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, you're so stupid. Wait, whoa, don't. Oh, no, you'd never say that to a future godly leader. You'd never talk to a future godly leader that way. Make sense? Mm-hmm. The second one comes out of John Rosemond's books, where he talks about raising a family of values. Too many parents discipline out of emotion instead of out of values. If you discipline out of emotion, you'll lose every time. You just will. You'll lose every time because emotions aren't sensible. Mm-hmm. They're reactionary. And that's okay, but you can't parent out of them. But yet, what? You're grounded. What? I can't. And they parent out of emotion. No, you parent out of values. So one of the things that as I read his books was so helpful for our family is, and you've heard me say this before, is we talked about, okay, so what are our family values? Now, we picked those when our kids were at an age where they could be a part of it as well. But we let them know, and we took our name. You can take anything. We took our name. And we did it. Okay, D, we're dreamers. We believe in the best of everybody and everything. E, we're enthusiastic encouragers of everyone we meet. V, we're virgins. We're sexually pure before and in marriage. R, we always do what's right according to God's word. I, we're people of integrity, which means we keep our word. E, we're evangelistic. We share our faith. And S, we're spiritually strong. We always worship God and with his people. That is who we are. Those are our family values. Now, if an action over here went against a family value, okay, now we have to talk. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not talking out of emotion. I'm talking about, wait, this is our values. And so we need to, because what you just did, that's not who we are. Okay, it's not who we are. So we need to talk about this. And obviously there might have to be some discipline, of course, in there, but they're a part of determining what that discipline is, because the family values apply to all of us. If I do something as a parent that goes against family value, my 8-year-old grandson can call me on it. And I have to face a consequence because I took something that was a part of a family value. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so I think those are two key things that I see that parents make mistakes on, that if you will always look at your child as a future godly leader and then parent according to that, appropriate to what that age is, and then what are your family values? Mm-hmm. I think you'll find yourself much further ahead.
So let's say that those kinds of thoughts, those kinds of values, those kinds of conversations haven't been taking place in a home, mm-hmm. which, I know that that there's several mistakes that I've made that are not in line with those. So every time we talk about this, I'm like, okay, Tom, you missed that one. You missed that one, but I remember when you came and you shared some of those thoughts with youth workers when we do our monthly youth worker luncheons, and I just remember like having some youth workers come and say, boy, I really want to get there, and I like the establishing values and beginning those conversations, but it seems overwhelming because when you don't start it early, like when they're young and can have input, mm-hmm. but now they're 16 and there hasn't been that real strong communication maybe, or it really is a lot of friction. How do you start?
Mm-hmm. Good word. Obviously, you start by starting. And I mean this, Financial Peace University. Okay, if I don't have $1,000 in my emergency fund, you know what? Can I put $5 in it? Can I take $5 and instead of buying that burger, and it's actually 2-for-1 sale, so I have 2 burgers for $5. Okay, can I put that into a saving? I got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So start somewhere, and potentially it starts just with me. So, for example, as a parent, what are my values? Mm-hmm. I can't impose something on a child that I don't own. So can I start with determining how am I going to live the rest of my life and what are my values going to be? Because here's the reality. Even when the child is not 16, I'm still going to be a parent to them. I still possibly be a grandparent. And there's other people I'm going to be a parent to that aren't my own children, but I'm going to be a parent to them.
Mm-hmm.
So start somewhere and start simply with you first, and then go from there.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, so you mentioned something, and it's one of your values. I think it was the first E where you said that the DeVries family, you are enthusiastic encouragers. Did I get the wording right on that?
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the things that I've just always recognized about you. You are so, and you even began our podcast with affirming me, and you're just a person of encouragement and affirmation, and because that is a value of yours personally and then of your family. So talk with us about just the power of words. I remember even in some conversations when I first moved back to Sioux Falls, and where I would make a mistake or something, I'd be like, "Oh, Tom, you idiot." And I mean, a lot of times it's when I'm on the tennis court or something like that. And I'm like, "Henderson," I yell at myself or whatever. And you're like, "Hey, you're not an idiot. So don't call yourself one," or whatever. But I just remember of saying just the power of our words, not just in other people's life and speaking blessing over them, but just even the power of words in our own life.
I don't think you have to look very far. Go to Genesis 1. That's all you have to do. We are created in the image of God. So we are like God. In how he works, we work. Okay, now obviously I'm not, omnipresent, omniscient. Okay, I understand that, okay?
Sure.
But if you look at Genesis 1, how did he create? He spoke everything. God said, "Let there be light." God said. And if you look at Genesis and just circle, every time it says God said, God said, God said, God said, that is how he creates. God spoke it, and then it was. He spoke it, and then it was. We're created in the image of God. We're created the exact same way. What we speak, it is. If you tell a little child, "You'll never amount to nothing," is that the case? It is. You spoke it, and it was. If a person says, "Man, this will never happen. There's no way it can turn out," almost every time, you're right. You're absolutely right. Now, obviously, you can't just flippantly say, "Oh, I'm going to have $1 million in the bank."
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, okay, I'm not being sarcastic, but you can't take it to that extreme. But that is the truth. So especially with people, one of the things that I think marriages, I'll come back to marriage. I think so many times people sometimes speak what they wish the person would change instead of giving affirmation on what they're doing good.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever they're doing good, say it. Years ago, there's a book called Whale Done. Okay. And people maybe have heard about it, but it's how they train killer whales at SeaWorld. How do they train these whales to do these acts? How do they train them?
Yeah.
Well, the book goes through it. And what they do is it's very simple. They applaud everything they want the whale to do, and they ignore everything that they don't want him to do. Now, they never chastise him. So if the whale does something wrong, they just ignore it.
Huh.
And the whale figures out very quickly, wait, if I do this, I get applauded. If I do this, I get ignored. I'm going to do it because I want to be applauded. That's how they train killer whales. Wonder if that works for kids. Instead of what we do, if they do something we don't like, we yell at them. And we speak words about what they did wrong. That's just going to create more. What if we just ignored it? Now, I'm not saying if they running across the street. I don't take that 100 feet. But what if we applauded and with our words, everything they did good? That was a great job. You did a great job there. Really good. Really proud of you. And the things that they're a little loud, "Be quiet." You just, they will figure it out. They really will. Well, so part of, I guess, my core belief is it's scriptural. When I tell somebody, "Man, I believe in you. Here's some things I want to say thank you for," those kind of things, I really mean that because they're created in the image of God. They're a future godly leader. Whoever they are, they might not see themselves, but they are. If a person's going through a hard time, it'll be okay. You'll come out of this. It'll be all right. You're not alone. Okay? Those kind of things, because those are words that create. So it's real simple. Words create whatever we want,
Yeah.
good or bad.
Whether that's about with others or even ourselves.
And I always get a cold this time of year.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah, and just the negativity that we can even speak to ourselves on those things. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, the story of kids, and by the way, the whale book needed to be an entire book because you just summed it up really well within. Was it 2 pages long, or was it like 150 pages of?
It wasn't a big book, but it was more words than that.
Yeah, but you gave a great summation. But the way that I like to say it, and this is only because of my own failures that I came out of got this statement out of, was catching your kids doing something right. And those that came out of difficult conversations that I was having with my oldest, and you know my kids very, very well, and communication's never been difficult for my kids, and we've always had great conversations and that. But I just remember a conversation with Zay at one point where he's like, "Dad, it just feels like I can't do anything right for you." And I said, "Well, son, you do all sorts of stuff right." And he said, "Yeah, but you never mention those. It always seems like you're finding stuff that I'm doing wrong, and I just wish that you'd catch me doing some stuff right." And I mean, I get emotional even just thinking about it right now, because I was like, man, that was a hard truth. That was a hard pill to swallow when that was shared with me. But it was so important that it was shared with me, because oftentimes that's how we learn the best, unfortunately, is when we do stuff that needs to be tweaked and that we fail at.
When our son David was in high school, he played basketball. And so one of the things I did, the old VHS cameras years ago, you'll have to YouTube it to figure out, for some of you who have no idea what that was. And I would video the game. So I videoed the first game, and I about passed out because when I watched it, I realized what I was saying, because it was picking up every word I was saying. And I went, oh my. And that was my stab in the heart. And I videoed the rest of the games because he wanted that. But I made sure I never said a word about coaching, about a ref, about anybody. No, nothing, kind of thing. There's one of my mentors always says this: if you can't think of anything good to say, think of something good to say. Because sometimes they say, don't say anything at all. Nope. Think of something good to say. You can always think of something good to say, and then force yourself to say it.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so I know we're probably coming up close to time, and again, I know we could talk for days, and it'd be like the longest podcast in history. But I think it'd all be fruitful. I think it'd all be great content. I know that.
At least we think so.
Yeah, exactly. And my mom would really like it.
Yeah,
for sure. But all right, so there are a couple more things I do want to ask you real quick. One is, so 40 years you've been in ministry and business and marriage, but yet you still have so much energy in all of them. So what keeps you just so motivated and energized to be successful in each of those fields, and really whatever you put your hand and your mind to?
Caffeine.
Yeah, I know that's not true. I know that's not true.
I know no, I don't drink. Right. And I would say this: I'm not sure I would use the word successful. Okay, I think a better word is faithful, because successful is such a comparison term. Yeah, and I know how you meant it.
Yeah,
I just say it for the people who are listening, because I think they get caught up in comparison is the root of all unhappiness. And so when we compare anything, our spouses with somebody else, our kids with somebody else, ourselves with somebody else, what we have with what somebody else has, will always end up on the short stick. Or they will too, but either way, it's a loss either way. So I think that the key for me is I am called to be faithful until God takes me. Now, I think I'll know when God takes me, okay? But until the time God takes me, I'm to be faithful to what he's called me to do. And he's called me to love people, seek and save the lost, disciple. It's pretty simple. It's commands he gave everybody, okay? Yeah. In that way. And so in my marriage, I want to be faithful to the very end. I was a kid saying that our goal is to have 80 years of marriage. Now, she might not know who I am, I might not know who she is, but we'll still be married, but faithful. Ministry, faithful, because I understand this. Life is, life is so short. And at the end of it all, I will stand naked before God and give an account of my life. It's the story of the talents. 1, 2, 5. It's not how many talents you have. It's the fact that whatever you had, you'll be held accountable to them. And so for me, every time I get up and when I wake up in the morning, I realize, oh my, God gave me a gift. Okay, today I have to be faithful to what he called me to do. And so because of that, okay, how can I be used to help most people seek and save the lost? How can I reach most people for Jesus? How can I help disciple people? How can I love people today? Mm-hmm. That's what he's called me to do. And I have to do that then with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, because I don't own it. He owns me.
And that does not require full-time ministry.
No.
In fact, I mean, everybody is in full-time ministry in whatever platform
Absolutely.
God's given them.
We're all
so
pastors.
It's not like that is just reserved for pastors and those that are in ministry.
Yeah. Like people, I turned 65 here in a couple months. Okay. Now that's not a big deal at all. To me, that's not a big deal at all. But it's amazing how many people that's a big deal to them, because it's the word they've been looking forward to all these years. Retire. I don't see retire in the Bible. I think they should refire. That's what I think they should do, because at age 70, I should have 10 more years of wisdom than I did at 60 and be able to pour into young men who don't have a dad. At age 75, I should have 10 more years wisdom than I did at 65 and pour into young men who don't have a dad. Makes sense? I always remember a poem. John Wooden is the one I remember him saying this. He said, in a book I read, that he said this. He said, I'd rather watch a winter than hear one any day. So please, my loving Father, let your life show me the way, for I'm just a mirror of what you do and say. I may misunderstand all the high advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding the way you act and the way you live. And so I know this, that every day I'm an open Bible for everybody I meet. When I drive, how I drive, it's an open Bible. I'm not perfect, but I'm just aware of it. God, forgive me for the times I was a bad steward of your gift today. Okay. But I want to be the best. Use me however I can be used today. And I think God will. I think God will use that. And it's God's. So I have energy for that, because man, God's not taking me yet. I got a gift today. Everything's a gift.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Okay. I want to talk about one more thing that we've talked about on different occasions as well. And we've already talked about the word, and you changed the word, especially in that context, from successful to faithful. But a lot of times, we're tempted to look at how we would define success. And we would say, okay, I want to watch that successful person, what that person does, so that I too can be a success. Okay. But that's not always the best way to find out what success looks like. So unpack that for us.
Well, first of all, let me give a thought. Right now we're in this period where everybody's talking about who's the GOAT, in whatever area of life. Is it LeBron James? Is he the GOAT, the greatest of all time? GOAT. Okay. And Tom Brady, he must be the GOAT now. Or in this venue, man, they're the GOAT. They're the greatest of all time. I think it's interesting, Tom, that when Jesus talks about the end of the world, end times, he says Jesus is going to separate into two groups, sheep and goats. And all goats go to hell. I think it's very interesting that we have a world that's aspiring to be a goat, and yet God says, Jesus will say, depart from me. You are cast away. Only sheep are allowed into the kingdom. So I think sometimes this whole inner thing of, I want to be the greatest of all. No, I want to be the best reed I can be, how God made me. But that's only me. I'm not comparing to anybody else, kind of thing. So I just throw that in as a thought, because I think in being the best I can be and finishing well, because what's success? Success is finishing well and leaving something behind. My best definition of success is planting trees, the shade of which you'll never sit underneath. I love that, because that's discipleship. That's legacy of people, not of money, because that doesn't last, kind of thing, but of people. So it's not what you do in the moment, it's how you finish. And the key to, was a person, quote, successful? Let's see 10 years after they're gone. 20 years after they're gone. Let's see what's still going on by the fruit of their lives. That is it. So one of the things I try to study, actually more than success principles, is I love to study people that failed and say, why did they fail? Especially in the Bible. Oh, there's a lot.
A lot of stories of failure. Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Why? Why did they fail? What got that? Because at some point, they started as a king. Saul started as a king. He started well, but they why? What caused that? Because at some point, what habits did they stop doing?
Mm-hmm.
What did they stop dwelling on, thinking on, that caused them to do it? Because it's always a drift. It's never an overnight off the cliff. It's a drift. And so what area of my life am I starting to drift in that I'm not even knowing it yet? But man, I want to pay attention because I know where that road leads because I've read it over there. I've seen it over there many times, failure. And that's why, for me, I think studying failure is even more important than studying, quote, successful people. I want to study, man, how did they not end well? Because I don't want to end well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. There's obviously, we just mentioned, and chuckled a little bit about there's a lot of stories of failure in scripture, but thankfully there's also so many stories of redemption.
Absolutely.
And restoration.
Absolutely.
And so, the good news is that there may be even a track record. There may be multiple failures that you have in your life, but God offers redemption and he offers restoration. And I think about, even like I mentioned, the failure that I had, with, and I haven't done everything perfect since that conversation, by the way. But the difficult truth of hearing that, that I just would love to be told what I'm doing right as well. That it was a story of failure, but it was also a story of redemption and restoration, because I realized, oh, you know what? I now know that I need to be more mindful of that.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be intentional with that. And so, if you're listening today and you're thinking about just, man, I've just failed so much, Christ offers redemption, and each day is, and you mentioned it, each day is a new day. Say, nope, today's gonna be a day of success, and I'm going to enter with that mindset in whatever area I need to.
And so, again, for my story, it's been 30 years since addiction. Okay, I was so upside down in so many areas, and I'm not perfect at all. You know that, kind of thing. But when you start with where you are, every day is a gift, and today's the first day of the rest of my life, and you start building the habits of that, where that road leads is better than you can imagine. Marriage is better than I could have imagined. The relationship with kids, it's better than I thought. Being almost 65 is better than I thought. Being with you is better than I thought.
Yeah. All right. Well, we end each of our episodes with something we call the final word. Okay. And it's just where I give the guest, 30, 60, 90 seconds, whatever, just to kind of, the floor is yours to give a final word of encouragement, of challenge, of whatever the Lord lays on your heart. But, and I've done this with a couple other guests as well, but instead of just kind of giving you the open things, we've covered so much ground, Reed. It's been so good. And when people ask me about you, it said, the one word that I always think about with you is just wisdom. And you mentioned it just in a few minutes ago, of saying, hopefully at 70, you'll have 10 years more wisdom than you had when you were 60. And you just place such a high emphasis on wisdom, and you are, and you give that wisdom to so many others, including me, and I'm a benefactor of that. So I'm so appreciative of that. But I'd love for you just to share, as your final word today, just some wisdom, maybe just you've worked so much with great mentors in your life. You've been a mentor for so many, but some of that greatest wisdom, that leadership advice for guys today.
And I'll change the word. I think it's follower advice, because in order to be a leader, you can only be a leader to the extent that you're a follower. When you follow Jesus with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength, one of the phrases that Pastor Keith at our church is, just an incredible mentor to me, says, God doesn't owe me anything. He owns me. And so when you are a total follower of Christ, then God will allow you leadership opportunities. And my life verse, I'll end with this. My life verse is Galatians 6:9. It says this: don't ever get tired of doing what's right. That's a good word. Don't ever get tired of doing what's right. Because in the end, you'll reap a great reward if you don't give up and quit. So what's right? Getting up early and reading God's word. Get up early and praying. Holding your wife's hand and telling her that you love her every day. Praying with her. Giving your kids a call and telling them how proud you are of them. All those things are little things. They're right. Don't ever get tired of doing what's right. In the end, you'll reap a great reward if you don't give up and quit.
Oh, that's good. That's a great word. That's not the final word. That's not just a good word. That's a great word for us to
I would drop the microphone, but it's on a stand, so I can't drop the mic.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing your time with me. It's always great to share space and conversation with you. But and I just am so appreciative and that you shared with listeners today. And as I said in the intro, that I had no doubt that they would both just enjoy it and then get so much out of it. And I always get so much out of it. I got so much feeding in my soul today. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and just your life with us today. And I love you.
I love you too, bro. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to the Giving Life podcast for my conversation with Reed DeVries today. If you'd like to connect with Reed, you can find him on the Celebrate Church Sioux Falls website and on Facebook. All right, that's all for this episode. I look forward to seeing you next time on RESGEN's Giving Life podcast. Until then, continue striving to be men whose life in Christ gives life to others.